Here's some knives that a friend dropped off. Wanted me to sharpen, clean them up for him. Like most knives used by people who don't sharpen knives, they're exceptionally blunt. There's no edge left on this at all. It's completely rounded over. Forget about cutting paper. You'd have a hard time even whittling wood with this. This is from the Henckels fine edge line, which I wanted to check out for quite some time to see just what they meant by fine edge. This is full flat grind. The edge, even though it looks like it's not the factory edge, someone has tried to do something with it, is still less than 10 thou thick behind the edge bevel, and the edge angle is very low. It's under 15 degrees per side easily. So they're not kidding. When they say fine edge, this is a relatively fine edge. The only thing that I don't like about this knife, the handles are very squarish, and the shoulder or heel of the blade right here is very squarish, and working over the top of it, these two are very square. But these knives are rather inexpensive, and the balance is about right there where your index finger and thumb normally grip. So for a rather cheap knife, I mean, it's a full flat grind. They don't say what steel it is, they just say German stainless steel. So it's probably some 0.5 carbon, 13% chromium stainless steel. Decent enough knife. This is another one, fillet knife from Rapala. Rapala has a whole bunch of fillet knives. I like this particular line. It has a soft handle, textured, so it's nice and grippy. Nice front guard, very nice end swell, comfortable, secure in hand, but it's a bit small if you're wearing heavy gloves. So late in the fall, when it gets kind of cold, unless you have a relatively small hand, you could feel a bit cramped. The stock is 1/16 of an inch thick. It has a full flat grind and a distal taper. The edge is around 25 thou thick and is sharpened under 15 DPS, so it cuts really well and is relatively flexible. This is another fillet knife from Rapala. It's their sort of economy line. The steel is only a 32nd of an inch thick. It's solid plastic handle. It's very, very slippery, much more prominent guard and sharper end hook. I really don't like this model. It's almost weightless, very slippery, and the steel is so thin it bends almost trivially. This was actually used as a kitchen knife, I believe, and you can see the blade is just warped all over the place. Now, if you're just using it to fillet fish, that probably shouldn't be an issue, but if you try to do any heavy work with it, and it's common again for people around here, if they were using this to fillet cod and they actually wanted to split him or dehead him, they'd use the same knife and put enough pressure on it to warp the blade probably. And I think that might have happened with these fillet knives because there's a couple of chunks taken out of the edge of this where it's really rough, and this one is the same. Now someone looks like they hit this with a grinder, because you can see a few spots here where it missed, and then they completely missed the edge here and ran up along the top there, but this needs a bit of work. The blade is seriously warped, but it still retains its point, as does the other Rapala. The point on the Henckels is completely gone and rounded over, so I'll need to straighten that up again. Now when I'm sharpening knives for friends, especially knives that are used as roughly as these ones have been, I like to put some constraints on the sharpening, because it doesn't make much sense to put a lot of effort into these knives when these are just going to be thrown in the sink, kitchen drawers, banged around in washing machines. So I just want to get an edge on them very quickly that'll slice a piece of newsprint, and then I'll be happy and they'll be happy. And this is the time to break out some of those cheap stones that, if you are a little bit into knives or sharpening, everybody tends to give you as gifts, and this is one of them. I don't like this stone at all. For most work, it's very hard. It doesn't wear at all almost, which means it doesn't release new particles, and it glazes over relatively quickly. And what I actually use it to do is flatten most of my smaller finger stones, and what I just used was a 200 grit silicon carbide stone, put a bit of a slurry on it, and I'll just use this to bring up the bevel on these knives and get rid of any significant damage. Now, fillet knives can bend very easily, which means you can't put a lot of force on them, but I really wouldn't even consider this part sharpening. I'm just trying to get an edge established, and it isn't this stone actually that's doing most of the cutting. It's the 200 grit silicon carbide swarf that's on it. I'm just doing a bit of flattening work on my finger stone. But all these inexpensive knives that you get, people give you to try to sharpen, they're usually only around 55 Rockwell, give or take. They have no alloy carbide to speak of, so they grind very easily. And I'm pretty sure this is already done. Some newsprint. Now, that's sharper than that knife has ever been in the history of them having that knife. But to refine it one little bit more, this is a very well used 600 grit diamond rod, and I'll very lightly micro bevel it, much higher than if it was my knife. I'll put this at around 20 degrees per side, again very lightly, just establishing that final edge and knocking the burr off. And now I'll just visually check the edge. Looks perfectly fine. I straightened the blade before I started. So now good to go. That's all it takes. Now, you don't need to use the diamond rod. If you want to refine the edge a little bit more, you can spray this junk off and take out another stone. This is a 1000 grit water stone, and put a bit of this swarf on it, but I like the diamond rod. Now, just do the same thing. Load this back up. It also keeps that knife nice and flat. Go to our other Rapala. And again, these are very, very easy to grind steels. And when you start to sharpen, you can feel it very rough as all the little nicks and burrs just grate into the stone, and it starts to smooth out as you get a nice smooth apex. So this is no longer catching. Now I'll work the tips a little bit more. The tips usually get grated against cutting boards, which are often glass. They're used to scrape out pots. They're usually really blunt. But now this edge should be decent. And as I expected, there's no significant heavy burr on this one. And again, this knife here is significantly more expensive than this Rapala knife, which usually means you get a bit better steel in it. So you shouldn't get as much burr problems. Just clean that off. Edge looks fine, it's not reflecting light, no heavy visible burr, so I should easily be able to slice my paper now. So again, that's sharper than that's ever been, and we'll just refine it a little bit now on the diamond steel. Very light. Micro bevel at 20 degrees per side. And you want to be careful on the steel. If you push too hard, you'll actually smash the edge over and cold work it, which you don't want to do. So of course, as a visual check, you can always cut the hair off your arm, and you can see how easily you can get these knives up to where they shave. So that's the two fillet knives down. Same process. This stone without the swarf is really slow cutting. Unless you really like to sharpen, I wouldn't recommend it. So, go to our fine edge Henckels. I don't expect I'll have significant burr problems with this. And that's now very smooth on the stone, and again, just want to work the tip a little bit more. And that should be done too. The edge looks fine, it's not reflecting light, so I should get a clean cut. Now there's a nick right there, next to the top. Yeah, there's a little piece right there out of the blade. Yeah, there's a piece right there out of the blade. One of the nice things about the rod is that because the rod is such a small contact point, it'll actually get inside that little piece and turn it, sharpen it into like a little serration, and gradually over time, when you sharpen the main body of that blade, that little nick will come out, but the rod in the meantime will sharpen down into it, so the paper should skip over it nicely when I'm finished with it off the rod. So now we'll do a clean slice, because again the rod goes down into that little divot and cleans it out, and the stone just skips over the top of it. All you need is a decent bench stone and a rod. If you don't have a decent bench stone, you can sort of make one, but an old cheap stone and something that grinds easy to get a bit of swarf. The cutting action without the swarf on this stone is easily 10 times as slow. So instead of taking, 1 to 2 minutes, you're looking at about a half of an hour. So I don't recommend throwing these out. I mean, you do get some use out of them, and you can finish edges on them half decent. The thing, however, that's a bit dicey about this is that you often can't tell what these stones are like until you actually get them out. The ones that are exceptionally hard usually are not that good, but sometimes they can be really hard and they can release particles. But the ones that are soft usually are generally relatively good because they break down. There's just a bit more upkeep. Ideally, if you can get ones that have very nice particle content and have a nice stiff bond but do release as they wear down, they're excellent, but you usually pay a lot more for them. I mean, this stones like this you can often get for $2 or $3 at flea markets, and if you lock into a right brand, you just keep buying those ones. But that's all it takes. It's not very much to it. Now, the funny thing about this stone, it's funny to me anyway, this has a coarse side and a fine side. The coarse side has almost no cutting ability whatsoever. It is more coarse than the fine side if you look at the scratch pattern, but it's exceptionally slow cutting. It glazes almost instantaneously, and what's even worse is 4/5 of this stone is actually the coarse side. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it once I wear the fine side out. And this is if you have some old belts for 1x30 sander or any kind of sander. Eventually it gets to the point where they don't have much aggression into them, and you really don't want to keep using belts that are worn out unless you switch them from metal to wood, in which case you can get some extra life on them. But after a while they start wearing down. Even on wood you don't get very much cutting action to them. You can reverse them, you can turn them inside out, you can load up the back with buffing compound in. But what I like doing with the older ones, take them, just nail them onto a piece of wood, and even after they've passed the point where they're good for cutting metal or even wood, they make a decent surface for flattening stones. So you take your bench stone like this, and I don't want to let this get really too hollow, and you put it on this. And you grind it, and you can keep these stones relatively flat, and you can add some fine sand and other things to this as well to speed up the action of it. So this is nice and useful for flattening your stones, and gets a bit more extra life out of the belts. And you just chuck the whole thing in the fire once everything gets worn down.